Welcome to part 2 of the ruler archetype. Now, before we get into it, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, I highly recommend that you do that because then you'll get notified whenever I upload new content. And if you like what you've seen so far in this series, you're going to love the stuff that I've got in store for you. So make sure that you get that done. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. In part 1, I explained what the ruler archetype is and what it represents. So just a quick recap. It represents your ability to lead, to create order, and also to be a good parent, and to rule, if you will, over your household and everything that can be seen as your kingdom, whether it's a business or a group that you're leading or whatever. So that's pretty much what it represents. So by now you know that each archetype has got an underdeveloped side and an overdeveloped side. So when we're looking at the ruler archetype, we have the weakling ruler on the underdeveloped side and then the tyrant ruler on the overdeveloped side. And obviously the balanced ruler is the one we're striving for, that part of yourself that's healthy and properly developed. So that's what we're trying to get to. But obviously we have these two dark sides that we have to get into in this video. Now before we do that, I want to just bring something up in terms of the ruler. The ruler is someone who can make proper choices. Now the power of choice is super, super important. And it's powerful. That's why you get a lot of people who would say, hey, I'm not going to make the decision. You make the decision. I'm not going to do it. Part of it is because they know there's power in choice. There's repercussions. If you make a choice, things change. So for example, if you wake up tomorrow morning and you say, hey, I'm not going to do these things anymore. I make a choice, a decision to stop these habits, to replace them with different habits, to do something else with my life, to maybe get rid of all the toxic relationships in my life and walk away from that. If you make that choice, things will change. Choice is powerful. And the ruler taps into this. When you're leading, or you're in the ruler archetype, you must make decisions. You must make choices. And you own that power. Now think of it like this. Whenever you're avoiding situations where you have to make choices, you usually avoid situations like that, you're basically lulling your ruler side to sleep. So your king or queen, they're becoming weaker. Think of it like any type of muscle in the body. If you don't work that muscle, if it's not active, starts becoming weaker. It deteriorates pretty much. And that happens with our archetypes as well. If we avoid situations where we have to show courage, perseverance, discipline, etc., our warrior becomes weaker. If you avoid situations where you have to think deeply, contemplate things, and all that kind of stuff, your magician gets weaker. So that's something to think about. Now, let's jump into the first one, which is the undercharged ruler, which has got the name of the weakling ruler. Now, one thing that's very important with this, and I'm going to give you an example of what the weakling ruler tends to do. So let's say I'm in a relationship and I get invited to go to an event and I'm like super excited, can't wait. So I tell my partner and I say, hey, we got invited to this event. Would you like to go? Now, pause. The underdeveloped ruler has something that we call inner defiance and outer compliance. Now, what that means is this. When I asked the question, would you want to go? Her first response internally was, no. I can think of a million things I would rather do than go, thank you. But externally, her response would be, yeah, let's go. I'm keen, right? So her inner and outer world is at odds with one another. And this happens a lot of times, right? So now, resume the story. So we end up going to this event. Now, when we're there, we just arrived, we haven't been there for a long time. Here's an example. She comes to me and she says, I don't feel so well. I feel sick. I feel nauseous. Right? I don't know what's causing it. So now you feeling bad and you're like, okay, you know what? Give me a second, yeah? Let me sort things out and we can go home and we can see what's going on, right? So you wrap up your things, you go home. Now what happened is she got what she wanted from the beginning. She didn't want to go. Now you're at home. You just popped in and you left again. Like, for example, the excessive ruler has got no problem with this. They'll get in your face. Let's take the same example. And they'll just say to you, I'm not going. I'm staying right here. You can go. You can have a good time. I'm not moving. Okay? That's what they would do. The Undercharged ruler doesn't like conflict. So what they'll do is they want something, but instead of standing their ground and saying, this is what I want, what they'll do is they'll find subtle, covert ways to try and manipulate people or the situation so that they get what they want at the end of the day. So why this happens, and this is important, there's a couple of reasons, but here's one. In the warrior archetype, I spoke about you having fire, that fire inside. The balanced ruler has got a healthy amount of, you could say, fire, which represents your power and all that kind of stuff, and they can control it, like I said in the warrior video. Where the excessive ruler, their fire is like out of control. They're very destructive people. They're destructive rulers, very inconsiderate, etc. We'll get to that. But the undercharged ruler, their fire is extremely weak. Okay? Now, to put this to you in a different image, think if you've got someone who's really powerful. They're well-built, strong, powerful individual. So when they need to use their power to overpower a certain situation, they just do it because they're capable of doing it. But if you've got someone who isn't so strong, they're pretty weak physically, they can't do that. Overpowering a situation and fighting the situation head on is not an option. Okay, so what that person will be forced to do is either avoid conflict completely, or if they have to sort it out, they'll do it in manipulative, subtle ways because they can't do it head on. They don't have the power and the strength to do that. Okay. So what we're referring to here, it can be physical strength, but it's usually internal strength. The weakling ruler doesn't have that power, that fire. So they wouldn't just go head on into conflict. They avoid conflict and they try and do things like I showed you in the example, manipulate and kind of get things to end up like they wanted to end up without confronting. Okay, that's really important. What the weakling ruler also tends to do, and this also depends, like I said in previous videos, it depends how far you're leaning into it. You can just have one or two traits of one of the excessive or undercharged archetypes, or you can be like textbook. It depends how much you're leaning in. So for example, what the weakling ruler also tends to do is they give their own authority away. Okay, so you see this, for example, in the classic thing where a man and a woman is in a relationship and she controls everything he does. Okay, he's like her slave pretty much. Everything he does, if she says jump, he's like how high. So in this example, the guy gave away his crown, which means he gave away his sense of self, his own desires, his own needs, and what he wants. So he gave that away, and this woman is now ruling over him. We're in a healthy relationship. Now I'll get into this in future videos because it's a bit complicated to explain in such a short time. But basically, when you're in a healthy relationship with your co-ruler, it's an equal amount of give and take, which is going to be really hard for you to do if you're imbalanced, because then due to insecurity and all sorts of other stuff, you don't want that, because amongst other things, if you give the person freedom, they might leave, right? That's what the insecure ruler would think. So the undercharged ruler would control the person by manipulating them so that they know they won't leave, okay? Where the overcharged ruler would prevent you from leaving by putting fear into you. You're too scared to leave. That's why you don't leave. Another way they can also do this is, for example, by convincing you that you think you won't make it if you leave. You're not good enough to leave. What are you going to do without me? You need me. They kind of make you believe that you can't build your own kingdom without them. And a lot of times this works. I mean, what you believe becomes true for you, right? So if they can get you to really believe that, you won't be successful on your own because you don't think you can. They keep you in this toxic relationship dynamic because you think you're not good enough to leave. That's one of the ways they can also keep you in the kingdom, knowing that you won't leave, and that gives them a sense of security where they know, I'm not going to lose you. You don't want to be in a position where you give your own power and authority away to someone else and have no say of what you want to do and where your life has to go. Remember, everybody's life is different. We're all here for different reasons. So you can't let someone else run your life for you if you have your own unique journey here in this life. So that's what you don't want to do. And the undercharged ruler tends to do this. They allow other people to make the decisions for them where their life should go. They don't decide for themselves, hey, I feel like I really want to do this, or this is what I really want in my life, this is what I feel I need. They kind of put that away. And one of the reasons is some of the undercharged ruler relationship dynamics would be, let me throw myself at the mercy of this person and give, because then they won't leave. So it's just another manifestation of that insecurity of not wanting their partner to leave. So they do everything they say without question, and they allow them to run their life out of fear that they'll leave the kingdom. You can put it that way. That's what happens with the weakling ruler. Okay, they don't own what they want and what their own desires are, their goals and dreams. They just kind of give it away. That's also quite common. Now, keep in mind that everything that I'm covering in this series is complex. There are many levels to it, and it's not just black and white. There are things in between. You know, it's not like a one archetype fits all kind of thing. I took it and I made a general overview and I condensed it, and so it's easy to understand. So I'm just giving you the overview. So if you want to learn more about it, you can go deeper, obviously. So when it comes to the undercharged ruler, these archetypes show up differently in people. Okay, so there are different sub-archetypes, if you want to put it that way. It depends on how the other archetypes are formed and stuff like that. So when we're looking at the undercharged ruler, here's example number one. The person might have all the other traits of an undercharged ruler, like for example, their life is generally not organized. They are not organized. They're generally a little bit lazy. They don't have the discipline to follow through, and they're not driven people, right? But they would like to be in the center of attention. They would like to make things all about themselves. Now, they generally like to take the role of a clown or a jester when they are in the center of attention, you know, making jokes and all that kind of stuff. The attention that they receive because of that boosts their own self-esteem, okay? So they like to do that. And another thing they tend to do is they're not very deep, okay? So when there's a deep discussion or something going on, they would often crack a joke or something just to lift it up to the surface again. So that's the one, okay? On the other side, we have someone who doesn't like the spotlight at all. They don't like to be in the center of attention. I always refer to it as like the spotlight. Think of a stage. They don't like to be on the stage, okay? They don't like to do that. What they like to do is to get someone else to go out onto the stage and be in the spotlight. And then what they do is they kind of pull the strings behind the scenes so that things play out the way they wanted to play out. But they don't go into the spotlight themselves. They try to take the back seat, if you want to put it that way. So the other thing is the undercharged ruler also doesn't like to express directly how they feel and what they really want. And number one is because they're not strong enough to do that. And number two is they don't like the repercussions that comes with that. They want to do it as, you could say, indirectly as possible, because then not a lot of ties lead back to them. So there's someone else that can be blamed and not them. So there are many reasons why they choose to do this. These kind of people, it's quite common for them to, when they're in between people, they're very different than what they are when they're alone. Okay, when they're alone, they usually have a lot to say and they're very different than when they're between people. Okay, that's also quite common. The undercharged ruler also tends to play the victim a lot. Okay, they poor me type attitude. It can even be like everybody is out to get me, the world is against me. They've got this victim mentality a lot of times. Now, if you've been following this series from the beginning, you would notice that there are certain traits that overlaps with the other archetypes. So, for example, as I'm talking about the undercharged ruler, you'll notice that there are magician qualities present here. The manipulation part, and you're right, okay? And if you look at the overcharged ruler, there are some strong warrior qualities there. Now, the reason for this is, like I've said in the previous episodes, the archetypes work together, especially in the ruler archetype, because that's when you access that part of you that runs your life and makes sure everything goes as it's supposed to go, right? You take control of how things play out in your kingdom. Well, obviously there's a certain amount you can't control, but that you can control, you will tap into the ruler archetype. So you're accessing the warrior, the magician, the lover, the nurturer. You're accessing all those qualities to be an effective ruler. So once again, like I said in part one, any dysfunction in those sides of yourself, those skills and attributes, will come into the ruler. So you're correct if you thought that the undercharged ruler has got an imbalanced magician quality, and they generally have a low warrior quality. That feeds into the ruler. So now back to the undercharged ruler. They play on your feelings. They'll make you feel bad, you know. So for example, the weakling ruler, let's put this in a parent situation. If your child starts to show power and autonomy and they start becoming their own ruler, you know, they want to create their own kingdom now. The imbalanced ruler would not like this. And I'm talking about both the undercharged and overcharged. They'll just go about different ways to prevent that or to limit it. So, for example, as your child starts feeling, hey, I want to create my own kingdom, I want to break away from the lives of my parents and build my own life, both the imbalanced rulers will try and stop that. So, for example, the imbalanced ruler that's undercharged will try and manipulate you or play games or whatever they need to do, make you feel guilty or whatever they do, to try and get you to hand over a degree of your freedom and power to them. Why? Mainly because of the insecurity we're sitting with and because of the imbalanced ruler's desire to be the center of power. So they want to be on top, okay, and the rest must fall underneath them. Where the undercharged ruler does this through manipulation and all that kind of stuff, more covert ways, where the tyrant ruler, the overcharged, would do it more direct. So for example, they'll make you feel useless by telling you how useless you are, or how they think you are, right? Or they'll just pretty much say, you're not going, it's not going to happen. You live here, you're my child, you don't do what you want to do, I have control over you. Now, if the undercharged ruler wanted to get the same messages across to you, they would do it indirectly by playing on your feelings, putting you on guilt trips, making certain comments, planting seeds in your mind, hoping that you will change your mind and do what they want you to do, or even become who they want you to be. They'll also manipulate your reality. I spoke about this in the magician video. So they do this subtly, indirectly. Where the overcharged ruler is more in your face. They'll just force you. They're very forceful and aggressive. Where the undercharged ruler prefers to avoid conflict and do it subtly behind the scenes without getting in your face. And what's also interesting, I said in the other videos that children go through different phases of development, right? If you look at children between, it depends, but usually between 2 and 4 years old, they go through what people call the terrible twos, you know, when they get really difficult and they start saying, no, I don't want to do that, or yes, I want to do this. They start becoming quite difficult in that way. This is when the ruler archetype starts to develop in the child. They start making their own decisions. They start saying, hey, I'm my own individual. I can do what I want. And they start playing with that. So it depends how the parent handles this will determine how that ruler archetype shapes in the child. I'll make another video in the future about this, but it's quite interesting how it develops in that fashion. Another thing that the undercharged ruler would do to show their, you could say, unhappiness with what you're doing, is they wouldn't come to you and say, I don't like that. I really don't like you doing that. What they would do is they would do it subtly. And one of the big ways in which they do this is sarcasm. They'll have these sarcastic stabs at you that they throw out at your direction to show you that they don't approve of what you're doing. They wouldn't just step up and say, listen, I don't really like what you're doing now. They would do it like that. They just use it to express their unhappiness with what's going on. They don't just step up. Very subtle. So they'll give these hints and these little stabs just to show you that they don't like what you're doing. So this pretty much is the underdeveloped ruler. So now let's take a look at the other side of the spectrum when it comes to the overdeveloped ruler, which is the tyrant. Now the name kind of says it all. It's someone who rules with an iron fist. They're very aggressive in how they rule things and how they run things, and they're usually the type of people who's like, it's my way or the highway. That's kind of how they rule things, right? So the first thing that we have to understand about this archetype is that they tend to abuse their power. Now it depends how much you're leaning into that side. If you're just leaning a little bit, you'll have some of the lesser traits, like you'll be intense, you'll be dominating, so people will experience you as dominating and intense, and you'll come across a little bit insensitive in how you deal with people. Or you can lean a lot into it, and you can even be abusive, whether it's physically, verbally, you abuse your power. Now, the reason why the tyrant does this is because they would like to be respected through fear. If you're scared of them, they've got control over you. And that's what their purpose is to get you to be underneath them by putting fear into you, by knowing if you're going to do that, I'm going to make you pay. They're very aggressive in that way. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing that they do is they're people who doesn't mind conflict. In fact, they invite it. And they'll be very proud of this, don't get me wrong. They will brag about it and say, I don't take any nonsense from nobody. They're kind of proud of that. They'll stand and they'll take the conflict head on. They've got no issue with that. The other thing about the overdeveloped ruler is they're usually self-centered. Well, both of them would be. I mean, the underdeveloped as well. They're both rooted in insecurity. But what makes the difference here is that the overdeveloped ruler has got like a bubble around them. They've got this shell. This bubble represents how they detach from everybody around them. They create their own world, and that's where their focus is. It doesn't go to the people outside of them so that they can see things from their perspective. No, you don't exist in their bubble. So when they make decisions based on themselves, because that's where their focus is. Their decisions are usually based on their own desires, about what they want, and it tends to hurt a lot of people. That's why if you're just leaning into it a little bit, you will have the trait where you come across very insensitive. So you will do something just for the sake of that you want to do it, and it will hurt other people that obviously has another way of seeing it, where you just don't do the effort to find out how they see things. You're just like, this is what I want, guys. This is how we're going to do it, and you need to live with it. You're very direct in that way, and you step on a lot of toes. And then, by the way, if you're excessive, you won't mind. You're like, yeah, so what? I step on a lot of toes. You won't really care about that. So that's one of the things where the balanced ruler, remember what I said in part 1, they've got the hard and the soft, okay? They're balanced. So yes, they've got the attributes where they can make hard decisions and not be moved. But they also have the ability to have empathy, to listen to reason, and also to have the soft side. So they can listen to reason and see, okay, you know what, that my decision isn't the best decision. I'm going to hurt people when I do this, so I might not do that. Where the overcharged, they don't have the soft side. They're hard, straight. So I make this decision, and whoever crashes and burns in the process, not my problem, okay? You'll probably have the attitude of harden up, okay? So that's pretty much what will happen there. The next thing is, because of their insecurity, they're very sensitive to criticism or challenges to their authority. So whenever someone gives them, some criticism, whether it's constructive criticism or it doesn't really matter, they usually respond with rage. How can you say that? Who do you think you are? You could say they attack you when you try to give them criticism or even help them in some regard. Now, without making it too complicated, both of these sides actually has the opposing side within them. The weakling has got a tyrant inside of them that bullies them, that makes them even weaker, where the overcharged or tyrant has got a weakling inside, and that fuels their fear of weakness. They have a fear of being weak, of being vulnerable. So whenever you insinuate that what they're doing has got some weakness to it, they will respond with the fire that they have. And that will end up hurting people. They'll do that. And it's a defense mechanism. Like I said in the warrior archetype video as well, I spoke about this defense mechanism that we create, where we make ourselves excessive to protect ourselves. So you become really hard in that regard. You're very sensitive to criticism and anybody who challenges your authority. The tyrant wants to be on top. They want to be the source of power. And it's the same with the undercharged. They just do it subtly and they pretend that they're not the one calling the shots, but they are. They're just doing it behind the scenes. It's not me. They'll play that innocent thing. But the tyrant, they're the one that wants to be in charge. All of you must bow before me. That's kind of their attitude. And like I said, whether they actually say it directly, but you can see it in their actions. They want to be in charge. They want to be the source of power. And if anybody comes close to them where they feel that you're a threat or you're a rival, they will pretty much bring you to your knees. They don't want someone that's their equal. They want to be on top. So that's the other thing that they'll do. The overcharged ruler also uses the weaknesses and vulnerabilities of others. They will exploit that to bring them down, to make themselves look better and feel better. So they bring others down. This is where the bully trait comes in a little bit. They will poke at your vulnerabilities, at your weaknesses, and make fun of it and bring it to the light so that you lose credibility, so that they get better. So they tend to do this a lot, and whether that's physically or verbally depends on the person. They also deal with situations in an overly direct and aggressive way. They're very direct. And like I said, this is a subtle trait. You might not even realize that you do that. Okay, you might not realize that you come across so intimidating and dominating. You don't think you do. I mean, for you, in later videos, I'll talk about why this is the case. But we often don't realize what we do, but we hear it from other people. So people would often accuse you that you just want your way, that you are intimidating, that you're dominating, that you just take control. You see, that's stuff that you'll do when you're excessive in this department. Like I said, the balanced ruler takes in consideration the hard and the soft, where the overcharge is just hard. The next thing that I want to talk about is, this is where people ask me a lot of times, what happens when two balanced rulers come into a relationship? Aren't there any power struggles? Now, it's a complicated answer, but to give you a quick rundown, when we go through life, we tip from the balanced side. Things happen. Maybe something really bad happens to you, you go through a traumatic experience, and it tips you off, and you lean to one of these sides. And then you have to correct that, do the healing and the work, and become balanced again. So yes, you will have power struggles because things will move you into one of these directions. But if you're two balanced rulers in a balanced relationship, there shouldn't be a lot of power struggles. The reason for that is the balanced ruler gives you your time to shine. If it's your time to be in the spotlight, that's cool with me. Step up. It's great. Enjoy it. Where for example, the overcharged ruler, they wouldn't like that, because when you do that, you're making them feel insecure, and they've got an issue with insecurity, so they won't allow that. I want to be at the head of the steering wheel, you take a back seat. So when there's an opportunity, they want to take the opportunity. The overdeveloped ruler won't give that opportunity to someone else and say, you know what, you can do it, go ahead, enjoy yourself. Where they wouldn't do that. They'll be like, you know what, my opportunity, take a seat, I'll do it. They want to be ahead, they want to be in charge, to remain their security that they have. They want to remain in that space, because if they retain that in every situation, they feel secure. So they want the power, they want the control. If that moves to someone else, they feel threatened, they feel insecure, so they want to take it back. So now you have power struggles. The balanced ruler is all about empowering others. Okay, where the excessive ruler, they're kind of all about themselves. I want to empower myself, and I want to see myself move forward. Put that in a relationship, and you've got a problem. Because now you have two people that want to see themselves grow and not each other. So now you're going to have power struggles, because each one wants the spotlight, and that's going to be a problem. So that's what happens in a lot of relationships when you look at excessive ruler. If you've got like a heavy deficient ruler, then the excessive will just dominate them. They'll always be in control, and the other person can't even breathe without the permission of the excessive ruler. So that would happen there, and that's super important. Just one thing that I want to touch on when it comes to the relationship dynamics here is that when you're in a relationship with a balanced ruler, and it's a healthy relationship, remember, just like everything, there are rocky times. Okay, you've got ups, you've got downs. Now, what the balanced ruler can do when they're in partnership with another balanced ruler, who's the co-ruler in the kingdom, you can kind of smoothen that out. Now, think of a spinning top to represent the relationship. In the beginning, it spins fast, everything is going well, everything is stable, but eventually, that top is going to lose momentum. The relationship goes through rocky times, and if you don't have a balanced relationship, the top is going to fall over and everything is going to fall apart. That's what you want to try and stop. And with the balanced ruler, If you've got a co-ruler who rules over this kingdom with you that's balanced as well, you can bring that top back into alignment. You can bring it back into balance and recover from those rocky times because you are balanced. If you're balanced, you can bring balance into your life. Where if you're imbalanced, you're going to bring more things that's imbalanced into your life. And that's super, super important when it comes to this whole relationship dynamic. So, by the way, also, like I said about the parenthood, if you are excessive, you're going to not take crap from anybody, and you, including your children. You're going to be military-like. This is how it's going to be done, and I will not accept anything less. That's pretty much how your attitude's going to be towards your children. You're going to be, like we said about order, excessive rulers are excessive with order and structure, and they absolutely despise it if there's no order and structure. Where, once again, the balanced ruler has got the best of both worlds, where if you're imbalanced, you only got the one side. So the excessive ruler is harsh, they're cold, they're dominating, they're intimidating to many people, and they don't take nonsense. So for example, like we said, the balanced ruler can also not take nonsense, but they control that power. They've got a softness and a hardness, and they can choose when to do what. So for example, if you think of the tyrant, here's an example of a father. Your children shows an achievement or something that they've been doing that they're really good at. The tyrant father, whether it's now leading a lot or not, it depends, they wouldn't pay attention to that. They can either break them down, like literally make fun of it and be like, you don't know what you're doing. You think you do. You think you know everything about life. That's how they break you down so they can build themselves up, you see. Another one can be if the father can ignore the achievements, pretend he doesn't care, just never pays attention to it, never gives you attention, never even gives you a word of admiration or praise. He'll just overlook it. That's his way of pushing you down so that he can pick himself up. He doesn't want to empower you because then you become his equal eventually, right? And he doesn't want that. He wants you to be underneath him. So that's an example of how that will play out in the parent dynamic. It's very important. So think of that military-like parent. Then you're looking at the overdeveloped ruler. And this happens for many reasons. Usually it's because of past trauma, can be because you grew up in a kingdom with an overdeveloped ruler, and now you're replicating that kingdom in your kingdom. You see, you're creating what happened to you in the past. That's quite common. And the reason, once again, I'll get into in future videos about why the subconscious mind does this to us, why we kind of repeat history when we don't want to repeat history. We'll get into that. So I hope that this part 1 and part 2 gives you an idea of how the ruler archetype works in our lives and also how it can show up in both the underdeveloped, overdeveloped, and also in the balanced sense.